Recording.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Lisa Hart. I'm with the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance. I think some of our board members are on. If you are a board member of the NCSA and you are on, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, Scott Epstein here with the NCSA board. I'm also the chair of Mid-City West Community Council. Thanks for being here tonight, guys.
Thank you, Scott. And I think Lorraine is trying to get in, not in yet. Dawn, I think, I know you're here. Can you please go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, this is Dawn Cotterell with LADWP.
Oh, sorry, I meant our board member.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But hi, Dawn.
Hi, duh.
Okay, you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, fine. Yeah, I'm Don Dwiggins, also with the NCSA board and with the Northridge East Neighborhood Council.
Okay, thank you. All right, and a few other board members. Oh, I think I see Jose is joining, just joined. Jose, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself? Maybe I'm catching him a little too soon. Okay, well, let's move on. Okay. Why do we have, skipped a few things. Okay, I wanted to mention, so if you guys can go ahead and enter into the chat your name, your neighborhood council or organization and what brought you here today, that would be great. And also if you can change where you put your name on the Zoom picture, if you can add your organization there. So, and most of the time today, I hope we'll all be seeing each other. I want to get through these slides really quickly so I can see all of you. So we'll do that shortly. And I hope today will be very conversational and we'll really just be chatting with each other about energy and policy. Our mission is to advance sustainability and resilience across LA through advocacy, sharing of best practices, and community action. We are recording because of Dan and Glenn reminded me that we need to record. You can use the raise hand feature to participate today. And we hope, as I was saying, this will be very participatory. And we have some community agreements that we'll share with you, and we hope you'll complete an evaluation because that's really, really helpful for us. This is a rough outline of the agenda. We'll be talking first about 100% renewable energy, and then we'll be talking with candidates for State Senate District 30, and I think I've seen some of them have joined us now. And then we'll be hearing briefly from our committees, and then we'll have time for anybody who wants to give announcements, and we will also be asking for evaluations, and I'll try to put a link to the evaluation in the chat when I get a moment. Okay, here are our community agreements. If you can turn on your camera and show your face, that would be great, because we really are trying to build community, even though we are haven't been in the same physical space in a long time. If you can assume good intent and give people the benefit of the doubt, that would be helpful. If we can demonstrate respect and appreciation, that would also be good. We love the chat, but we want to refrain from having too many tangential or side conversations in the chat. We do want to be focused on the conversation we're having. We want to listen intently. We want to step forward and then step back, meaning contribute and let others do the same. We want to be as concise as possible. And of course, we want to have fun. Okay. So I want us to dive in pretty quickly. Are there any other board members who have joined us in the last, I see Lorraine. Lorraine, do you want to just introduce yourself super briefly?
Sure. My name's Lorraine Lundquist. I am with the Northridge East Neighborhood Council, and I'm a board member for NCSA.
Thank you. And I know I saw Jose earlier. Oh, and I see Muriel. Muriel, go ahead. You are muted. Can you unmute yourself? Thank you.
Hi, I'm a board member of the Echo Park Neighborhood Council, the part of I'm a co-chair for the Public Works Public Safety and Parks Committee, and I'm also a board member for the NCSA.
Thank you. And Jose, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi,
cool.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Jose Orozco Pelico. I am the current president for the Boyle Heights Neighborhood Council and also a steering board member for the NCSA.
Thank you. All righty. Any others that I've missed? I think is Ernie the one that we're missing? Is he here?
Hi, everyone. Good evening.
Hi, Ernie.
I'll go here, steering board member of the NCSA. Thanks for joining. I'm excited for today's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ernie. All righty, so let's dive in. First, we're going to talk about 100% renewable energy, and I'd like to hand it over to Dan Cagle, who is involved with more than one neighborhood council. So I'll let him introduce himself, and he's also our energy committee chair.
Hi, yeah, I'm Dan Cagle. I live sort of in West Adams, so I'm in the United Neighborhoods Neighborhood Council. And I also used to live and still own a house in the Greater Wilshire Neighborhood Council area, sort of Miracle Mile. And I've been interested in sustainability for ages. So I'm the chair, I happen to be the chair of the Sustainability Committee in both neighborhood councils. And I also chair the Energy Committee for NCSA. I'm an energy nerd and a climate nerd. So let's dive in. I guess the first question is, why are we here today? Well, back in 2007, after California told cities to get off of coal, Los Angeles canceled a new coal plant. That turned out to be an incredibly good idea because since then, renewable energy has gotten cheap. It's gotten so cheap. It costs about 1/10 of what it did back then. It's almost unimaginable how much cheaper it's gotten. At the same time, LA's smog has been getting worse. 2020's smog was the worst in decades. It's becoming clear that the only way to fix our smog problem may well be to stop burning gasoline, diesel, and natural gas. Meanwhile, electric cars, trucks, and appliances have been getting steadily better, cheaper, and more efficient. So electrifying everything may actually be practical soon. And lurking in the background is the elephant in the room, climate change. It's caused by burning fossil fuels, and it makes for crazy weather and bad fire seasons. But even if we weren't interested in doing anything about that, we may still want to electrify everything for financial and health reasons alone. And because, I will not lie, electric cars are really fun to drive. All right, so these 4 trends, renewable energy, smog, electrification, and climate change, they're all turning LADWP's world upside down. So to answer my question, we're here today to talk about what all that means for the city and for our neighborhoods. Now, it's a little hard to see how a city can completely switch to renewable energy, given that there are days when solar and wind power are not available. So we found a little video that tells the story simply and clearly. It's 5 minutes long, but it's not boring, I promise. Let's watch it and then come back and get into the details. So here we go. Attempting to show a video. Ready? Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Okay, here goes.
So this is Renewable, a sprawling American town. People here want to move away from fossil fuels, but people here like their big houses and their personal vehicles. So we built this model town to show what it would look like if we really tried to switch to 100% clean energy as fast as possible, but using technology that already exists. So, can we do it? The first step electrify everything, or almost everything. There are big benefits to this. For one, electric cars or heat pumps are generally much more efficient than their fossil fuel powered counterparts. And no gas guzzling cars driving around means cleaner air and quieter streets. So residents replace their furnaces, cars, ovens, and more with electric versions. As a result, the town no longer has direct emissions from transportation and buildings. But all that extra electricity Renewable now needs has to come from somewhere. The fossil fuel powered grid.
Now, for this simulation, we did have to simplify things a tad. In reality, grids are huge, and a community's exact energy mix is generally determined by large utilities. Decisions aren't made by a single town, but the concepts still apply. So now that all the town's vehicles and appliances are using electricity, the grid has to get bigger. So I'm going to add some extra electricity lines back here.
With all these improvements in place, we've cut our emissions by a fifth. Back to Renewable's grid. It's currently powered by a mix of natural gas, coal, nuclear energy, and renewables, roughly the same breakdown as the US itself. To cut emissions further, the town will need to shift away from natural gas and coal and toward renewable energy. Solar and wind are relatively cheap. Let's try bumping renewables up to 30%. Now we can retire coal completely. Not bad. Emissions are reduced, but the grid can't take any more wind and solar. These types of renewables aren't consistently generating power exactly when people want to run their electrical appliances. Grid operators have to make sure power supply at any given moment meets the power demand. This is how much energy Renewable has to produce throughout the day. You can see it peaks in the morning, then rises again in the evening. And not including solar, this is the remaining amount of power that Renewable needs to generate. The peaks and valleys get even higher, forcing grid operators to shift down and then up different forms of energy. Wind power could maybe take up the slack here, but what if there's no wind? To make up the difference, Renewable has to turn to natural gas power. That doesn't work for our zero emissions goal.
One solution is that Renewable could invest in a form of energy storage, like these massive utility-scale batteries. That way, excess renewable energy can be saved up for times when demand exceeds supply.
And let's say the town installs smart meters, incentivizing power use when energy is most abundant. And you can see batteries and policy have smoothed out supply issues, allowing for even more renewable energy.
Okay, so now we're almost there. We're 10% away. Final 10% of the town's emissions is coming from natural gas. From here, residents could decide to build another nuclear power plant, but that would take a couple decades. And the town, unfortunately, isn't situated for hydropower or geothermal, so they opt for an imperfect solution, hydrogen.
Hydrogen can be created through excess renewable energy, and once produced, it can be used to power the town whenever, unlike batteries, which are usually meant to be used within the day. Now, hydrogen's not especially efficient. Creating, compressing, and storing hydrogen requires roughly twice the amount of energy than just sending the solar power straight to power a light bulb.
Still, by electrifying everything, scaling up renewable energy, shifting the load with batteries and policy, and getting that last 10%, Renewable is now 100% powered by clean energy. But this highlights a broader point. It's really hard to stop using fossil fuels. The good news is we seem to have all the technology to make that happen. We just need the people and the policies to move forward.
All right.
sharing. There we go.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, now we're going to hand it over to Jasmine Vargas, who's a senior organizer with Food and Water Watch and Food and Water Action. And she's going to give us more of a background on this issue, and then we'll dive into the conversation.
Hi, Jasmine.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. And I'll get right into it. Let me just put my timer because I'm trying to stay on time. My name is Jasmine Vargas. I'm a community organizer with Food and Water Watch. I've been working with communities across LA on building a climate justice movement and support the efforts at LADWP to build more local solar, increase and expand energy efficiency, and getting off fossil fuels like the natural gas power plants that we currently have in Basin, and also coal. Thousands of people have signed the Food and Water Watch's 100% clean energy by 2030 petition. And hundreds have taken action in the last few years. Currently, 1/3 of the LA's neighborhood councils have submitted community impact statements in support of 100% clean energy by 2030. So I'm going to go through, excuse me. I'm going to go through, am I still sharing my screen? I'm so sorry.
You're sharing it, but not in presentation mode.
I see.
Yeah, it's not full screen.
Great. Well, we're just going to leave it like that.
That's okay. It's working.
Great. Okay, so this study was, like Dan said, mandated in 2017 by the City Council. And when the council directed LADWP to study investments necessary to get just to 100% clean energy by 2030, partnering with third parties like NREL, and also creating a community engagement process with environmental justice, finding ways that this 100% clean energy study can find benefits to EJ communities on the front lines of the climate crisis. So the study is the legacy of 10 years of climate action in LA. And this is just a screenshot of the video that you can find online at ladwp.com. No, I'm sorry, it's org, isn't it? No, it's com. ladwp.com, and you just go into the search and put clean energy future, and you can find all the information you need on LADWP's plans. So I wanted to show you how we got here really quickly. This is a timeline of the last 10 years. I really see this all starting when we held our first march and rally on October 10th, 2010 on the west lawn of LA City Council. At that time, I was just starting as an organizer, and we had hundreds of people participate. And Mayor Garcetti ended up rolling up and telling us, you know, he pledged as council president at the time to get us off of coal by 2020. And as you can see, the timeline goes from there. LA climate movement, environmental justice movement have been busy. The study launched in 2017. At that time, the studies had to take many things into consideration because climate action has not slowed down. We passed California's Senate Bill 100 in 2018 that set the current mandates to reaching 100% by 2045. LADWP and the mayor announced they were going to stop the repowering of in-basin gas plant turbines, equaling 1,661 megawatts, and replacing those with clean energy. And so now we're at this time where the LA 100 report will be released in March, and that will feed into the SLTRP 2021. SLTRP stands for Strategic Long-Term Resource Plan, which is basically LADWP's 20-year power plan on how to get clean, not just clean energy, but energy to meet the needs and demands of LADWP customers. So why 100% clean energy? We already saw from the video that this leads to a more resilient smart grid. Also, the energy efficiency and programs could ultimately lower the bills of customers and create good local union jobs. One example is the Elon and solar plus battery project that was approved last year that created hundreds of union jobs in the Central Valley, and to ultimately get off of fossil fuels and slow down climate change. Also, because there is a history, there is a legacy of environmental racism, that this transition to 100% clean energy future can actually help us right those wrongs. Environmental justice was born by discriminatory racist policies were used against people of color. This is a map of redlining in Los Angeles in 1939. And if you actually look at the borders of where the communities were redlined, i.e. given less opportunities for investment, their property values were lowered, the hazardous waste and industrial projects were cited here. You can see actually that it matches the previous slide, the solar potential and the highest solar potential in the area. So this is a way of actually creating the solutions to the climate crisis by building more local solar in the communities that have been disproportionately impacted by environmental racism. And that's the opportunity I hope you guys take from this today. Also, because we're in a climate disaster, this is a map of the latest polar vortex that has basically made the Midwest and Texas grind to a halt. I'm not going to go into the reports and the news that's come out, but I think that it's clear the climate is changing and is becoming more dangerous. Not only that, we're seeing massive loss of ecological diversity. We're seeing infrastructure failure. We're seeing sea level rise and ocean acidification. Furthermore, we're seeing all this while we've already hit a 1 degree Celsius increase since pre-industrial levels. We only have until 1.5 degrees Celsius to keep us in where we have a habitable planet. Anything over 1.5 degrees of temperature rise can lead to catastrophic system failure. That's I think why there's so much urgency to get this plan going. And it shows that it also, this LA local plan that we're all going to participate in has global implications. So let me show you the study scenarios. We have 4 scenarios here. Each scenario has a different tweak in it. Not all of them are the same. I could start with the SB 100 scenario, which is the scenario that reflects what the SB 100 bill that passed, getting to 100% clean energy by 2045. Just like limited new transmission and transmission focus all get to 2045. Early and no biofuel scenario actually gets to 100% 10 years earlier, 2035. Every scenario here is all getting us to 100% clean energy. And some other differences are that, for example, transmission focus and a limited transmission focus does not include nuclear and natural gas. SB 100 does include existing nuclear. And because you can still use cap and trade in SB 100, you can continue using gas plants. You could see, we'll get a little bit into what the study looked like, but I think that this conversation moving forward can focus a little bit more on the opportunities that we have. So each scenario, all 4 scenarios have different customer demand projections, moderate, high, and stress. The stress projection is only used for SB 100. And these are the different projections and what they mean. The moderate load assumes easy, low-hanging fruit and electrification. You can see high means more ambitious, matching the efficiency goals set forth by the mayor's Green New Deal. And then stress is if you had the same aggressive electrification as high, but you did not do the efficiency and demand response improvements to manage that growth. Okay, and I'm at 10 minutes, so bear with me.
Yeah, okay.
And so key takeaways here are all scenarios include cap and trade starting in 2030 to reach the 100% clean energy goal. One pathway, like I said, gets us to 100% clean energy by 2030 and without cap and trade 2035, and that's the early no biofuels. One thing we learned from the stress scenario was the energy efficiency and electrification of buildings and vehicles gets us to 100% clean energy and helps us do it more affordably. And the cost differences between all the scenarios are mostly accrued when we're trying to reach that last 5 to 10% to get to 100% clean energy. This is an example of one of the graphs that we saw as advisory group members of the 100% study. Some of the takeaways from the greenhouse gas emissions analysis made is that emissions in life cycle combustion significantly drop, as does pollution, indoor and outdoor air pollution. And we also see that the gas plants that are in basin and that we have on the grid will be running much less than they are today. In generation, as you can see, we got really into the details. I think some of the takeaways are that there are some more out of basin clean energy than in basin clean energy. That has to do a little bit with the cost of clean energy and how it's a little cheaper out of basin. But there's enough local solar and battery storage capacity to power LA in basin. The new transmission lines and upgrades that we need are going to be important, but they might take a while. And there has to be some firm capacity to be built in order to keep reliability. And as far as investments goes, all scenarios are between $57 and $87 billion over the entire annualized cumulative costs. Scenario that goes early and no biofuels actually gets us to 100% 10 years earlier. So the cost is accrued within those 10 years, within those 15 years from now until 2035 rather than 2045. Hydrogen here in purple is added, as well as fuel cells. And you can actually, some of that cost can be because they're newer technologies. And then you could see that the rest of the mix is fed with geothermal storage, customer solar, utility solar, and wind power. They also tackle environmental justice and workforce. The study uses Cal EnviroScreen 3.0, which is a statewide tool to map communities that are highly impacted by pollution and other environmental hazards. The preliminary discussion of the benefits of environmental justice communities has been made as we talk about air quality and cost of health impacts on those communities. There's an analysis to be made on local economic development and clean energy jobs. We see, and we've talked about already, how electrification and efficiency goals from the LA Sustainability Plan are added. And, with everything going, LADWP is still working on it now. So the Clean Grid LA program is looking at creating local resiliency hubs at at parks and recreation centers where we can have solar storage and opportunities to keep people safe during climate disasters. What the LA 100 study does not do is capture health impacts of indoor air pollution or electrification of medium and heavy duty vehicles. It doesn't incorporate the health benefits of reduced neighborhood level and indoor air pollution. And it, we can use it, but it doesn't itself evaluate how the design, energy efficiency, and clean energy programs that support environmental justice communities. So to recap, greenhouse gas emissions from life cycle to generation down. And we see that we can get zero emissions by 2035 with the early no biofuels, and SB 100 scenario does not reach zero because they're allowed to continue using cap and trade. Local workforce and economic development will see more benefits from clean energy infrastructure. The study does not analyze the cost of electrification, energy efficiency, and demand response of LADWP or ratepayers. So we have to see what those impacts are to cost, but also the benefits to people and lowering their bills. And the transmission lines and in-basin distribution upgrades are not cost prohibitive. In fact, they're a very small, relatively, part of the cost. But they do take a while to complete and would need a lot of community support to get them done. So this is how you can get involved. We're going to see on March another round of community outreach meetings led by LADWP and our partners and the partners at NREL. Also go to LA Department of Water and Power Board of Commissioners meetings. We're lucky enough to have a Board of Commissioner with us today, Susana Reyes, the Vice President of the board, which will be on the panel. LA City Council ECCEJR committee meetings, which is the Energy, Climate Change, Environmental Justice, and Rivers Committee. We'll be hearing, would love to hear from you. And then finally, the SLTRP that I mentioned, and the plan, the next 20 years of the power system. And with that, I want to say thank you for having me, and I hope this helps with the conversation that we'll be having today.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jasmine. I think that was really helpful for getting us, we hope, all on the same page. I'd like to introduce, as Jasmine mentioned, we do have Vice President of the DWP Commission, Susana Reyes, here. I'd like to introduce her. Susana, I should call you, sorry, I should call you Commissioner Reyes. I'm terrible with formalities. It's a real weakness of mine. If you could say a few words about the study, if you like, and then I think I'll ask both you and the other speakers I have yet to introduce a little bit about, I'll just throw out two tough questions right off the bat. Why are we talking about biogas? I'll just tell you so everybody knows the Neighborhood Council Sustainability Alliance Energy Committee is not a fan of biogas. So we'd like not to have biogas. And also, I'm curious, and you might not know, Commissioner Reyes, but maybe somebody on the panel can tell us why most of the scenarios are so far out into the future. One other thing I should say so that everybody knows is that the NCSA as a whole has taken a position that we would like 100% renewable energy by 2030. And none of the scenarios actually tackles that. So that might be a better question for Jacqueline. But Commissioner Reyes, if you want to introduce yourself and say a few words, please be my guest.
Thank you. It's my pleasure and privilege to be with you all with our distinguished panel. This is so exciting. Jasmine, thank you for your presentation. Make it crisp and clear. We are indeed transforming the power supply with clean, reliable resources, preserving that reliability and maintaining financial stability. We don't want to be like Texas, right? We're going to be really secure when it comes to steps that we're going to be talking about taking on the LA 100, because we are committing to that process. This is an objective and groundbreaking undertaking. And thank you, NREL, for your role in this, and the LADWP staff, and of course, the advisory group. The modeling done by NREL, and here's where we're going to be talking about the different scenarios that Jasmine mentioned, is actually state of the art. It's the first time that the entire LADWP, we're the biggest municipal utility in the nation, that a study of this size was done in one holistic undertaking, from generation to transmission and distribution, while evaluating the various reliability measures and contingencies. Those 4 scenarios are gonna have different emphasis on how we get to 100%. And those are modeled, I think I was looking at some the LA 100 presentation before. There's like 1 million simulations that NREL did that got factored into those 4 models that we are now looking at, including the various electric load, energy efficiency, and demand response levels. So, but the study, this is the important part for me. It provides insight into the potential community impacts of the alternative paths to 100%. I want to make sure that the study, the findings will really center and focus on environmental justice and equity, while looking at the projects that we're going to be undertaking, its impacts on air quality, health, the local economy, jobs, and EJ issues. So this 100 doesn't provide recommendations, right? But it gives us, LADWP, the tools to really better understand the benefit and challenges, because there are challenges that we will be hoping to surpass, and taking a look at what those opportunities are for each path of those 100%. The other one is in answer to your question, Lisa, about the biogas. I'm not a fan of biogas either. I know that this is something that is touted as clean, renewable energy, but well, if it's thrown in the mix, the way that it is made through combustion still generates the emissions that we are actually trying to avoid. There may be technologies in the future that will make the monitoring and the technology cleaner, but biogas has a ways to go, and throwing it into the mix will be something that DWP has to really take a look at, and if we are going to go to the 100% and making sure that we meet the reliability and resilience and climate issues that Jasmine mentioned, we need that urgency. We need that urgency, and we need to go fast or faster. Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, Commissioner Reyes. I don't see Dr. Pickle. So Dr. Pickle, if you're here, shout out, please. I do see Jacqueline Cochran, who's with NRO, which is the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, who's been, well, as far as I understand, Jacqueline has been a leader of this partnership with DWP. NREL is a research partner with DWP on this effort. So Jacqueline, I'd love it if you can chime in and let us introduce yourself and let us know your thoughts.
Do you want to go to Fred? Dr. Pickle is here.
Yes, Lorraine just told me that. So let's go ahead. I see him now. Thank you. Hi, Dr. Pickle. Go ahead, Jacqueline, and then we'll bring him into the conversation as well.
Yes, I'm Jacqueline Cochran with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and I just want to make clear that I'm happy to help explain what we're seeing in the scenarios and in the study, but I don't have an opinion about how to proceed. So I'd be happy to take specific questions.
Okay, fair enough. Are you able to say, or maybe Dr. Pickle can say, why the scenarios are not why there aren't any scenarios looking at 2030, and why 3 out of the 4 are looking quite a bit further out?
That was a discussion with the, at the start of the study. and in consultation with the advisory group. We do have the 2035. The 2035 study does achieve 98% clean generation in 2030. So it gives you a sense of the kinds of scaling you would need to do with the wind and solar and batteries and so forth. The real challenge is meeting the reliability and when we're talking, another point I was thinking with the discussion of biogas, we don't assume in the study that we're just swapping natural gas for biogas and calling it done. We're really trying to drive down the use of any of these, just like the video said in the beginning, we're really trying to drive down the need for any kind of combustion turbine that's run on some kind of gas, whether it's clean hydrogen or natural gas or biofuels, but it's there for when you need it. So it does produce emissions. Any of those fuels do, like NOx, local NOx. We assume that we have more state-of-the-art technologies, in terms of emission controls. But it's there to not have the load go out, not have the widespread outage.
Okay, thank you. That's super helpful. Okay, Dr. Pickle. Dr. Pickle is the ratepayer advocate, so he's advocating for all of us and has our interest in mind. Dr. Pickle, if you could introduce yourself and maybe share your thoughts on the scenarios in biogas and anything else you'd like to say.
Sure. I have been the ratepayer advocate, head of Office of Public Accountability since 2012 for the city, and the final stages of the Beyond Coal major choices at the policy level were being announced as I came aboard. And one of my concerns was, at the time, DWP was looking at IPP as largely a natural gas replacement project.
What IPP is, please?
Excuse me, Intermountain Power Project, which is based in Delta, Utah, which is the sole remaining major coal-fired power supply for the city of LA. It also looked like a great basin for renewables. From several directions, people were coming and saying, let's turn this into more of a renewables hub. And gee, if you need some gas for stabilizing things, great, but let's be more of a renewables hub. That's moved ahead faster than I anticipated. Like many things in the renewables business in the past decade, things have moved faster than the experts have anticipated. So that's good news. Will it continue? Well, that's our job to make it continue. But at what cost? Because the median household income in LA is below the national average. And the cost of living here, last I checked, was certainly not below the national average. So we have to be mindful of the cost impact on our citizens. And LA is noted for being good at promoting itself in many ways. That's what most of LA is all about. And so we really want to be a good example of what can be done on this front. But to do that, we have to balance cost against speed of adoption of new technologies, and we have big uncertainties. Uncertainties with regard to the speed of climate change, uncertainty with regard to technology progress, and uncertainty as to how fast we're going to come out of this economic mess we're in right now.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask a question, and those of you who know me well probably know what I'm going to say. And then I'd love to open it up to anybody else who wants to say something or ask questions. So if you can just raise your hand virtually or physically, and if you're on my screen, I'll see you, and then we can continue the conversation. What I always want to ask Dr. Pickle and anybody else who wants to talk about this, when you talk about balancing the cost, I'll be honest, I get frustrated when we have that conversation because I feel like we're always talking about the cost of the transformation that's required. And I don't hear us talking enough about, in my opinion, in my admittedly strong opinion, I don't hear us talking often enough about the cost of not doing it. What is the cost of not moving as quickly as possible? When I look at what's happening in Texas, and when I look at what's happening in Oregon, where my sister didn't have power for a week, and when I think about the forest fires, and I know we're just at the beginning of really seeing the impacts of the climate crisis, these are very, number one, they're painful, they affect our quality of life, there's a social cost, but there's also a huge financial cost to all of these things. And I don't hear enough in the conversation about weighing that cost. So, okay, I'll get off my soapbox and let you respond and anybody else respond to that.
I think the information that NREL has provided and will continue to provide will be a great basis for having those sorts of discussions, because their analysis in terms of the economic impacts in multiple dimensions and in terms of the morbidity impacts from health risks and health benefits. I like at least one other person here. I came from the clean air of Seattle and went to an undergraduate college in Claremont, which in the 70s, which was downwind of LA, and my first weekend there, I was greeted by 100-yard visibility smog banks. So I understand the importance of clean air. And I almost had a reflexive cough. So I think what NREL will provide is important information in that dimensions. Inevitably, this information won't be quite complete in all the way we want. And the other component is sometimes we can get bigger carbon reductions by focusing on other sectors. And I'll choose a value-free example. It was about a decade ago. I was looking at the numbers for solar installed that would be installed by the year 2020, and the numbers were $150 per megawatt. And Georgia was proposing a nuclear power plant. And the cost of that nuclear power plant as proposed in about that time frame was roughly $150 per megawatt hour. The stalking horse was newly dropped natural gas prices. They weren't very dropped this last week. And I looked at the costs of carbon reduction from the nuclear plant. And the answer was about $300 a ton for the carbon reduction from the nuclear plant. Well, what's happened in 10 years? That nuclear plant, I believe, is going to come in at over $300 a megawatt hour, perhaps more. And solar's $20 a megawatt hour. At that point, I wouldn't be talking about cost of carbon. It's just cheaper to put in for desert solar. So one, these things change, these trade-offs change over time, and NREL has done really a truly leading-edge study and is continuing as they wrap up truly leading-edge work, and I've been doing this since the oil crises of the 70s. And they are including all the things I ever dreamed of including in this type of analysis. the trade-offs are, you often have to make trade-offs between sectors. And if we can do some of these trade-offs like transportation versus that last 2% or 5%, we ought to understand what those trade-offs might be. And with time, with the technology improvement, we'll continue to move ahead. So a lot of what we have to be thinking about is what's a least regret strategy as we move ahead. Do we want to spend really capital intensive on big things up front? And this means everything from combined cycle natural gas plants to circa 2025 batteries, where 2035 batteries might be faster, cheaper, better. So these are really hard decisions, just making it easy since I'm not the decision maker here, NREL isn't the decision maker, Suzanne is one of the decision makers here. So their tough job for her is getting us to make sure we can lay it out for the decision makers in a way that's useful. That's a long answer to a short question.
Thank you. That was super helpful. And I also went to an undergraduate college in Claremont, so we'll have to talk about that another time.
Lisa, can I jump in for a second?
Yes, go for it.
Fred, I totally remember the smog back then. Flying into LA in 1980 was, oh my God, what have I gotten myself into? And
I believe flying into Claremont in 1980, in 1970, I had the same thought.
It does, and like it was months before I actually knew there were mountains in Pasadena. So I think one of the interesting aspects of this generally wicked problem we're facing is that there's an opportunity if we electrify buildings and transportation, that gives DWP sort of the revenue stream needed to build more renewables. Is that true? That's my impression. Who wants to take that?
May I answer that and approach it from another angle as well, Dan? While this NREL study is being worked on and finalized, we have continued our power system transformation. As Jasmine mentioned, we're building out local solar and expanded options. We had the feed-in tariff plus and the VNEM, or the virtual net energy metering pilot programs. We've approved the ELAN solar. We've expanded distributed energy resource programs like the Power Savers. And then anything for those scenarios that were mentioned, we're planning for new transmission. No matter what scenario you look at, we're going to need to bring in more renewable energy into the basin and getting that energy to communities that need it for reliability and for equity as we replace the older natural gas. And the early findings, Dan, informed us that really over 70% of the future electricity will come from wind and solar. And so our PPAs, or power purchase agreements for wind and solar and battery storage, the last 2 years we've ramped that up, but we continue to seek the more renewable resources, prime sources of renewable energy. The electrification and the building, electrification of the transportation and building electrification are really components that will matter because they address a huge component or majority of the emissions that are in our jurisdiction. So that there will be plans to address that as well. We already have our electric vehicle planning for that is included in the Green New Deal with the mayor's office, and building electrification and decarbonization. In fact, we have plan for like $100 million that we just approved that will go into the weatherization and taking a look at building electrification opportunities as well, along with our community partners. So I hope I answered that question.
I could add just a couple points about the electrification and its impact on costs. We do see that the scenarios with higher electrification have lower costs on a per kilowatt hour basis. That said, these scenarios also have more flexibility in the demand when that demand occurs. So that's really important to think about, because if all that new electrification comes at night when the sun isn't on, generating solar power, it could be more expensive. But with good planning about how to electrify and how to help shape the timing of that, it can definitely reduce costs.
Thank you. I don't think I see any hands raised, which is a little bit bewildering to me, but we can just keep chatting. Dr. Pickle, a little bit what I'm hearing, and you didn't say this, I know I'm putting words in your mouth, but it almost feels like we're going to be making decisions without all the information we need. And that's just sort of the nature of the beast. So if that's the case, how do we do that? Dr. Pickle, if you're speaking, I think you're muted.
I muted myself when I was intending to unmute myself.
Yes, I do that.
We're always making decisions with inadequate information. And that's just part of the energy related business. And you end up having to hedge your bets in the process. So that's part and parcel of the beast.
Okay. And then I guess my question is, and I see Ethan and Don have raised their hands. But I guess what I would want is we make decisions as we move as aggressively as possible is what I think we need to do. So that's my 2 cents. But I'll hand it over to Ethan.
Hey, thanks, Lisa. I was just curious. I've been wondering this question a little bit, and just wondering, especially given Mr. Pickle, the things that you brought up about how we are going to be having to weigh, do we want to be investing early? Do we want to be waiting until later? And knowing all of that, I'm just interested sort of, a lot of the work that NCSA and Food and Water Watch have been doing has been trying to get out into the community and talk to community members to help weigh that. I'm just also curious, for the Ratepayer Advocates Office, what process you're going through to similarly to reach out and talk to a community, and what that process looks on your end. So to determine where the Ratepayer Advocates position is coming from.
Whereas NREL gets to the conclusion of their analysis, part of our role is to review DWP's calculations on the potential impacts on rates. Now, this is over a 25-year period, and what shape rates will take form in 25 years is an open question in and of itself. So on this sort of economic analysis, it's best not to get too much into the detail and to try to think of the broad annual impacts. And in fact, the calculations are being done on a 5-year process, on a 5-year step by NREL. So it's useful to think of the overall impacts on the community, even though it may not show up in a residential rate, it'll show up in local business costs for their power, and you'll end up paying that as someone who lives in the city, directly or indirectly. So we're looking at that. And the other part is one of the problems with investing big early is you miss the advantage of technical improvements over the next few years. So if you were to dive in with today's technology, when we're getting very rapid improvements in a number of these technologies, thankfully. We may be better off waiting a few years for some of the major steps. And we may end up being able to go further cheaper, and the benefit of demonstrating that you can go further cheaper by timing against the technology will mean more people imitate us as we move forward.
Can I jump in again, Lisa? I think one of the things the study also found is that all of the scenarios envision us building one or two major solar or wind plants per year for the next 10 or 15 years. And I think that's part of the no regret strategy, because those are cheap. They're not a big expensive piece. Is that your impression too?
I mean, in a sense, the wind is sort of a mature technology. The solar, large-scale solar, is sort of a mature technology at the commercial scale. There are some people who think we might be able to half the price of large-scale solar. But that isn't the problem. The problem is storage and timing all of this and coordinating it and integrating it into the power system. And what is the role, for example, of demand response in terms of moving things forward?
Okay, thank you. Ethan, did you get your question answered?
Not really. I was asking more about what the Ratepayer Advocate's Office's process was in terms of gauging what the community feels about, one side or the other of investing more or investing later. What the process of the Ratepayer Advocate's Office looks like.
We're taking economic data from the results of the NREL study, and we haven't seen that data yet in complete detail. We've gotten a lot of it, but they're also refining their analysis. So we may need a redo on some of these data requests. And we're going to wade through it to help form our opinions. As you heard me, one of the key things are, what are we trading off? What could other sectors do? What are the big uncertainties in terms of technologies, looking across the various scenarios? When we did that with the once-through cooling study that some of you remember, that process took about 4 months. And then we would reach out to the community. We would reach out to this committee. We would reach out to the neighborhood council, DWP MOU group. And we would reach out to the other major alliances if they're interested. But those two alliances are the ones that really care the most.
Okay, thank you.
Lisa, I need to jump in here because I think that this conversation is missing a huge component. I think we're missing the fact that, for one, the whole reason why solar has been so cheap and so much has changed faster than Dr. Pickle thought possible is because we have demanded climate action for the last 10 years. We have set the demands that are creating the pricing. So I will have the numbers for you and say that if we were to actually lead on putting more solar, more storage, it would actually send a signal to the market that that we're ready for it, and it would actually drive down prices even faster. I think that the fear here is that we're going to somehow fit the bill for climate leadership, but what we're really doing is finding out a way of investing those resources into the communities, into local economies, local solar, local energy efficiency retrofits, demand response, all of these things, EV infrastructure, EV adoption is going to create local economy stimulation, local jobs, and local opportunities to actually gain from this transition. Half of the plan is assuming that there's going to be a lot of customer solar. LADWP is going to also figure out how to buy that solar from community members. I know it's more expensive to do it locally and in basin than out of basin in the desert, but that desert solar is going to be to some big developer that can afford to put up the capital. Local solar microgrids and all of the efficiencies that go with it are going to go to money here in LA pockets. That's what's going to lower bills. That's what's going to help ratepayers.
I think it's tough for LA to have a major impact on the pace of technical progress, because keep in mind, LA is 1% of North America, and North America is 5% of the world. The part of the reason that solar went from over $200 a megawatt hour for the commercial large-scale commercial desert projects in the mid-aughts is investments in China and Germany and other parts of California for those projects. So really, we don't drive on our own the technology decline curve. Now, we are out in front on the topic of hydrogen, using hydrogen as a burnable fuel, and that announcement alone helped move some things forward in the U.S. But the major players in industrial gases like Air Liquide and Air Products had been running R&D and commercialization operations on this for 10 years. They were the ones jumping up and down that they finally had a customer.
Okay.
That said, I think it's fair to say that LA could have a major impact on how we do things in LA. So if we had a big project to do building electrification and insulation, we could maybe shift our market from furnaces to heat pumps fairly quickly.
Okay, there are some hands raised, so, and we should work toward wrapping up. So I'm gonna start calling on folks. Dawn, go for it. Dawn, you're muted. Okay, I'm gonna go to Renee. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. This one is my question is a little bit off topic in a way. I'm looking at kind of life cycle stuff. Let's say that, look ahead a bit until we got we're really going with solar panels, with wind turbines and so forth. But as I understand, they have a solar panel, a wind turbine has a finite life cycle, and it has to be replaced down the line. And I may be wrong, but from what I read, I had the impression that some of the critical materials that go into solar panels, wind turbines, and so forth are mined. They come out of the earth, and in a way, they're not renewable. So I'd like to hear somebody address that issue of kind of what's going to happen 20, 30, 40 years from now.
That's not my issue. So if this is someone's expertise, please jump in. But representing the national lab here on the call, yeah, there are supply chain issues with some of the materials used in solar. That is a big focus of work of a different part of our laboratory, is the full circular economy of all the materials, both the sourcing of it and as well as the disposal. So I'm not able to answer some of your questions here, but we could maybe have some answers when we do a public outreach on that topic.
Okay, thank you. Renita Duncan, who is one of our candidates who will be speaking with us shortly for State Senate District 30. Go for it.
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple of questions. I believe this is going to be for Jasmine, Ms. Reyes, and possibly Dr. Pickle, because Jasmine said earlier that this will have we'll see economic benefits. And I'm particularly concerned because of the district, like the small businesses, and how they're going to see benefits as far as auto mechanics that don't work on electric vehicles. I'm concerned about those that live in that Inglewood refinery area that are depending on those jobs. And I am interested in how the people specific to our district are going to be able to afford this transition with the timeline that we have placed forward. So I think with that, I was wondering with Ms. Reyes, what partnerships we have to help communicate this to our constituents so that they understand and have an opportunity to transition and warp speed. Thank you.
Jasmine, do you want to go first?
Okay. Susanna, I will just say, because I would love to hear from LADWP as well on this question, but I would bring up the fact that this question has been something on the minds of climate justice and environmental justice advocates for a while. And we're building at this moment a genuine relationships with labor to figure out what a just and fair transition for workers at the refineries and other oil and gas workers looks like. The opportunities that we need to create locally for that transition are the same opportunities that need to create those local clean energy jobs. And if we keep thinking about these costs as something that's going out of LA, out of our pockets, and not something that's going back into the pockets of our communities, into the pockets of workers, into the pockets of businesses, then we're never going to find the money. But the money is there, and the transition and how fast we do it can actually spur transformation of how we treat and think about community and peers participation. They could be the engines for this transition, not the ones that have to ultimately pay the rates, the higher and higher rates, but actually spur the adoption. We're going to have to count on communities across LA to do this through how they use their energy, where they use their energy, whether or not they're adopting EV cars, whether or not they do solar. And we need to be able to also support that transition. That looks like retrainings, that looks like incentives, subsidies from LADWP, but also the city, and frankly, the federal government. We need a Green New Deal nationally to make sure that we fund this transition in the next 10 years, which is what scientists say is all we have to stave off the worst of this crisis.
Well, I love what you're saying, Jasmine. It's very transformative. Commissioner Reyes, go ahead.
Yeah, Jasmine, you mentioned the just transition, which is really key to looking at industries that are employing people in the fossil fuel industry. The DWP sees itself as an employer for local hiring. We do have a preference for hiring locally. We have a workforce development program at DWP, which I chair the ad hoc committee, and we're looking at the essential or core jobs that we are going to have, not just for today, but for the future. And we're already partnering with LA Trade Tech and UCLA doing a study, and also USC on the equitable transition for that. So there will be jobs in the future, but also jobs in the apprenticeship level, where we can look into our local communities and see those create those access and opportunities. We're working with our city personnel to make access to jobs easier and not as complicated in terms of like background checks and all that, and really making sure that there are the opportunities for retraining, as Jasmine has said, the apprenticeship level, and looking at the sort of like a classification that is common, and then as an entry point to that pipeline of work that is available within LADWP. I know we cannot hire everyone, but the training that we provide will prepare the folks to be hired by other businesses and other industries who may be able to come in and say, okay, they have the adequate training. So we want to be that engine for the economic growth also for the city. I hope I answered your question.
Well, thank you. I think we should try to move on to the State Senate District 30 conversation. So thank you. I'm excited by what some of you are talking about, because you're talking about, from what I'm hearing, a really transformative role for DWP, for them to play a very different role in the community than we traditionally think of when we talk about a utility provider. So for me, this is really inspiring. And frankly, we have to transition really quickly, which means we all have to learn new ways of doing things very, very quickly. So I really appreciate the conversation and the inspiration. And so I'd like to segue by asking the candidates for State Senate District 30 their take on this conversation and on energy. So I think what I'll try to do, I'm going to try to time folks, because this is because you are all in the interest of fairness. We'll see how well this goes. But so what I'd like to do first is invite each candidate, and we'll go alphabetically. And I'm not sure, since we're in a Zoom meeting, I'm not sure if everybody is here, but it turns out that Renita Duncan is first alphabetically. So that works out pretty well, because I see you. So if you can take a minute and 30 seconds, or up to a minute and 30 seconds, and introduce yourself, tell us what why. I know this is a lot to ask in a short period of time, but anything you want about why you're running and all that, and also your take on the energy situation in Los Angeles. Go for it.
Yes, thank you. My name is Renita Duncan. I am a candidate for California State Senate District 30. And the reason I'm running is because the cost of living in California has been very difficult. I'm a middle-class mom, I'm a veteran, and I'm a single parent. And I have 2 jobs. So I know if it's difficult for me, it's difficult for many. And I was tired of looking for someone to do something for me. And I decided to be the voice of the regular middle-class business owner, mom, dad, whatever your household structure is in my district. And with that, I understand government programs and most of all strategies for transformation. And that's what I want to bring. Economic transformation to District 30. And that's what I'm about. That's why I'm running. This conversation is wonderful for me, because that's why I asked the question, how are we going to see tangible economic growth based on this change? And that's what I'm getting from this conversation. I appreciate it, but that's what I want to hear, because if I'm talking about as a representative helping sustain this, I want to be able to do that at the state level, but I also want to hold accountable the 10 years that we've had to wait to get this kicked off, and that we just got restructured on last year when it's almost time for election time, and why we only move when it comes to people voting for us. We have to change that. We have to be accountable all the time as your reps. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Ernesto Huerta, I think I saw you earlier. Could you, if you say something, I think you'll pop up on my screen.
Yeah, I'm here.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'm going to ask the same question of you, if you can introduce yourself and give us your take on the energy issue.
Great, thank you for letting me talk to all of you. My name is Ernesto Huerta. I'm a candidate for State Senate, and I'm really running because there's a clear lack of political will and courage in the state legislature to act boldly and to meet today's crises completely head on. And I think the climate crisis is a great example of this. And in regards to energy, I think that both of the major 2 political parties have spent the past few decades, ever since we've known about climate change since the 1950s, putting forward insufficient solutions, market-based solutions, things like cap and trade policies, carbon taxes, which have been shown to not really have a long-standing effect on lowering carbon emissions. What we're putting forward as a candidate for state senate is to really rein in the corporations, the largest corporations, or the corporations who are the largest contributors to climate change by putting them under public ownership to ensure a just transition by allowing our economy to be coordinated democratically, our transition to a 100% renewable society to be coordinated by ordinary people. So we're talking about the nationalization of the energy industry, of utility companies like PG&E, of the agricultural industry, of the manufacturing industry, to ensure that they are 100% accountable. And to just tackle in the couple seconds I have left about the market solutions that I mentioned earlier, it is completely unfair that we have to be bending over backwards to give economic incentives to the corporations who are the most responsible for this economic crisis. And that is exactly why we're pushing for the full nationalization of the energy industry and to make them accountable to democratically elected boards elected by the people.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Assembly member Sydney Camlogger Dove, are you here?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I will ask the same question of you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Sydney Camlogger, Assembly member for the 54th Assembly District and candidate for Senate District 30. I have lived and worked in this district for close to 20 years while at Crystal Stairs, helping to fight for childcare funding for families who need it, as well as for childcare providers, as district director to then Senator and Assembly member Holly Mitchell, while on the board for the Los Angeles Community College District, and currently as the Assembly member. I have been at the forefront of criminal legal reform, protections for working families, renter protection rights, economic relief during COVID, and holding law enforcement accountable. I'm running to provide the 30th Senate District a strong, bold leader with the experience and the courage to fight for real progressive change. I am fighting to clean our air and our water, to move us away from oil-based energy, to lift folks out of poverty, to support reparations and neighborhood economics, to achieve equity in its fullest form, and to keep our brothers and sisters from being killed by law enforcement. I was intrigued by the discussion and have tons of thoughts about it, about fortifying our grid, about making sure that we have a diverse portfolio of non-oil-based renewable energy, of infusing huge investments from both the state and the federal level into making sure that we have a fortified infrastructure for the entire state, and of making sure that we are not losing jobs, so that we can breathe clean air and drink clean water.
Thank you. All right, Daniel Lee, I know that you're here. If you say something, then you'll magically pop up on my screen, I think.
Yes, I'm here. Thank you, Lisa.
All right, thank you. Go ahead.
So my name is Daniel Lee. I currently serve as Vice Mayor in Culver City. I was elected in 2018 as the first African-American person to hold this position. I'm gonna dispense with my normal intro because this was a particularly interesting conversation for me. One of the things that I've been talking about in this campaign generally is our need to accelerate our response to the climate crisis, and specifically around SB 100's goal of completely getting our electricity on the grid from renewable sources and carbon neutral sources at 2045, and the need to scale that back to 2030 or 2035. So I was particularly excited to hear that part of the conversation in particular. I think there are things that we can do in the short term to help us accelerate that timeline beyond just state policy. Culver City is part of the Clean Power Alliance, which is a community choice aggregation where the members choose where their electricity comes from. We've been getting our electricity from 100% renewable sources for 2 years now, a little bit over 2 years. I think that's a way that we can have cities convert to renewables now and help push the price of renewable energy, solar and wind down, and accelerate our transition. I have a lot of other thoughts around hydrogen, around community solar, around a number of other things that I hope we'll get to in the discussion. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, perfectly timed. Thank you. Now finally I can figure out this little alarm thing. And Cheryl Turner, thank you so much. I can see you. Thank you for, I don't know what you just did, but that was great. All right, go for it.
Thank you for having me. My name is Cheryl Turner. I'm running to be your next state senator. I am born and bred in Los Angeles, California, attended the public schools here, went to USC, graduated with a law degree, and went on to manage my own law firm where I was involved in everything from consumer rights to civil rights and business tax and real estate. And I have a history of advocacy in Sacramento, where I've gone up and down the state to talk to legislators in their offices about various proposed bills, including charging stations for apartment buildings throughout, so people will have access to that. And I have also been involved with the South Coast Air Quality Management District, where I have fought for clean air and against pollution. I've worked on pesticide cases and asbestos cases to try to remove those toxins from the environment. 33 minutes. I'm working for a green, sustainable environment where we'll have more parks and green spaces. I want to protect our wetlands and our oceans. I want to help the homeless find housing, healthy food in the neighborhoods, clean water to drink, community gardens, and electrified public transportation, as well as, of course, private transportation. And I want to make all that accessible to everyone. And of course, I want an environment where people are judged not by the color of their skin, but by their character. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Let me ask, is Devon here? Devon, if you're here, can you say something? Okay, I think he's not here. We've asked some stakeholders of State Senate District 30 to come up with questions. And so I think I know Liana's here, so because I can see her. So Liana, Liana, can you? I don't know what your question is because this came together quite last minute, so I'm not sure how much time we should give each person. So why don't you tell me how much time you'd like for each candidate to be able to answer your question, and then you can ask your question, and we'll start with Ernesto Huerta because we're just kind of switching the order that we do it in.
Okay, okay, I've got a couple of questions I could ask if we have the time.
That might work. So let's go with your top priority,
okay.
if that's okay.
Sure. I'm thinking.
Go ahead and introduce yourself too.
Okay, my name is Liana. I'm a board member at the Mid-City Neighborhood Council, which is right in the middle, just of your district. It's just east of Culver City, around the end of West Adams. I'm our transportation liaison, and I'm involved in all the different projects and sustainability stuff that we're doing on the board. I guess my first question is, as you probably know, our region is extremely park poor. It's considered one of the least green space accessible regions in LA. And environmental justice is kind of a core issue of many frontline communities and neighborhood councils like ours. I'm wondering how you perceive California's government, or how your office is going to work on building community trust and gaining these perspectives directly from the communities most impacted by these intersectional issues. Maybe
that's
a minute?
I'm thinking too. I think that's such a great question. You folks don't have to take 2 minutes, but I'll give you up to 2 minutes. I think that's a fantastic question. Okay, we'll start with Ernesto.
Yes, I think that's a really great question. I myself am a community organizer. I've organized in the grassroots in South Los Angeles for a very long time around many different issues like police brutality and the lack of education. And through all of that work, I found that there is an inherent distrust of both political parties here in California, and in particular, the Democratic Party, because many people in this region have voted Democrat for about a decade, expecting to receive a big payoff, a progressive policies like Medicare for all. In fact, we voted to get the Democrats a supermajority in the California legislature, but we have failed, or at least they have failed, to gain those type of reforms for us. So in terms of regaining that trust and building that connection with community members as a state senator, I guarantee to have a permanent contact with the social movements that have really erupted in the past couple of years in South LA and in the rest of District 30, in particular around those big, as you mentioned, the intersectional issues for mass incarceration. That means talking to, the leading force, Justice LA, Dignity and Power Now. If we're talking about police brutality, of course, Black Lives Matter, and also community control over the police. I've worked heavily with both of those organizations to fight back against the Sheriff's Department in South LA over the killings of Dijon Kizzee, Andres Guardado, and AJ Weber, who was a 16-year-old. So I really do think if we want to rebuild that type of trust and ensure that the community is really being heard, it means that we have to have a permanent contact with them, engaging in their social movements, engaging in their organizations, in their spaces. It is absolutely criminal that most of the ideas that are popular here in California, like Medicare for All, are completely, or mass incarceration reform or community control over the police, are not at all being pushed for in an effective manner in the state legislature.
All right, thank you very much. And next we'll have Assembly Member Kamlager.
Well, thank you for the question. I would lean on the skills that I refined while I was at Crystal Stairs. They are skills that I engage in as the Assembly Member for the 54th Assembly District. When I worked at Crystal Stairs, we were in the middle of a budget deficit and cutting social safety net services across the state, childcare particularly at risk. It is an economic bedrock for so many families, especially Black and Brown communities across South Los Angeles. And we organized. We organized not just with parents who have been the prime organizing target, but with childcare providers, all childcare providers, license exempt, licensed, small, large family homes and centers. And that requires work. It also requires walking in with open ears and open hearts. And lastly, it requires understanding the distinctions that come from the various micro populations within that larger demographic. That's what I have done as the Assembly member. There are distinctions across every district. The West and the East don't necessarily agree on the tactics for a particular outcome, just like the North and the South. You have to unify those voices, but you also have to elevate them and understand where those distinctions are coming from. I am humbled that I have been endorsed by a number of nonprofit organizations and stakeholders across Los Angeles County who are deep in the social justice movement. I have relied on them for years as I work to create my legislative package, as I have leaned on folks to help get them passed, and as I have elevated those voices to talk about the unique challenges that are faced in my district and in South LA.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Lee.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think it's a great one. One of the reasons that I was elected in Culver City is because I had been organizing with the Sierra Club for 8 years prior to my election. First, to get a 2,500-foot setback on the Inglewood oil field, the portion that's in Culver City, and then secondly, to close the oil field. And I'm happy to say after I was elected, we closed down the portion of the Inglewood oil field that exists within Culver City. I'm also committed to helping and working with organizers across the county to close down the other 90%, which is outside of Culver City. That's an example of the type of community work that I'm committed to going forward. I've also worked with the Liberty Hill Foundation, where I had an environmental justice fellowship, community coalition, where I was an organizer and an MSW intern, the LA Community Action Network in downtown LA, which works on issues around homelessness, Food and Water Watch a couple times. I know they're a few folks on the call from Food and Water Watch now, Sacred Spaces for Indigenous People, and many other groups around the county. Going forward, and my plans for the 30th district in particular really center around having what I call a second session, which would be a session that happens with the community, a series of meetings after the initial legislative session is done. It would have 3 goals. One, to educate people on what was passed in the previous session and how the laws that were passed could benefit them, hear from the community about how those laws fall short, and then third, actually source policy going forward with the community in an active manner. I know many groups like the Advancement Project, Community Coalition, Scope ACE have written policy that they've gotten passed on the proposition level, but I think we can do it in a more active level going forward. And I'm committed to working with the community. I really believe in co-governance. And I think there's a way for me to maintain my independence while also creating infrastructure to listen more well to the community more broadly.
Thank you. All right, Cheryl.
Yes. So it's good to see you and meet you again. Well, I think I've seen you at the Wilshire Station, which is where your neighborhood council would meet when it was actually meeting before we had to rely on Zoom and COVID. So it's good to see you. And one of the things that, as your state senator, that I would do is, of course, to visit each of the neighborhood councils, visit each of the neighborhood associations, as well as the homeowners associations, and give them an opportunity to get to know me personally. That would give me an opportunity to hear more about their concerns, and allow you to give me input on things that we're proposing in Sacramento. As I've said before, as legislators, future legislators, we can always come up with great ideas about proposed bills, but it is only when we have the opportunity to speak to members of the community, stakeholders, and even businesses, small businesses and large, and we get an opportunity to hear from them their perspective and how these bills might impact them, that we can begin to really work together and focus on crafting a bill that will benefit everyone. And so I am dedicated to doing that. I'm dedicated to keeping you informed of all matters that are going on, and to help you to address your most pressing concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Renita.
Liana, thank you so much for the question. I, when elected, will first of all believe that I need to take accountability for the mistrust that has happened over these last 20 years from our state government. We've got a lot of promises and no follow through. So my first responsibility is to take accountability for that as your leader. So I will do that. Second, I have what I call the 3 C's. It's community, collaborate, and communicate. So I'm working with the community. I recognize being what I call boots on the ground. It's a military term, being out there in the streets with you. A series of town halls, emails, and back and forth is just really not enough for the communication. And when we want the community to understand what is going on, that's what I want to bring. I recognize I don't need to be in Sacramento all year. So I'm going to be out in the community, not only with the neighborhood associations and the other organizations, but I'm running nonpartisan for a reason. I did not want to go on a party line, on a party agenda. I wanted to be independent of thought so that I can represent the people of District 30. And that's what I'm always gonna do. I have 3 core values, and they are truth, integrity, and transparency. And that means everything I do, you are gonna know about it. If I say I'm gonna do something, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna ask the hard questions, and I'm gonna make sure I listen to what you need. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I know we have other stakeholders, constituents of this district. Does anybody other than Leanna have one final question that we have can ask? If not, I'll give it to Leanna and you can ask your second question and we'll give each person a minute to answer and then we'll move on to committee updates. Okay, Leanna, I think you get a second shot.
Again. Okay, I'm not sure how the sustainability org will feel about this, but I'm sort of switching tactics. We're doing a lot with getting our neighborhood prepared with resiliency plans, able to support each other, figuring out what information resources we have, all of this. We've been working on it for a long time, but it's always about like educating the neighborhood and stuff like that. We're wondering what your resiliency plans are for the state and what financial strategies or channels are available for local communities to support our citizens for emergency preparedness given this current, given our climate crisis.
All right, let us start this time with Assembly Member Kamlager. Oops, I started you too soon. Let me start over. Okay. Where are you? Where is she?
I'm here. Oh, you said you started me too soon, so I didn't know what that meant.
I started you over, so I'll start over again. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Okay, here you go.
Okay. Well, so very big question. I'm going to try to get it all in. Part of it is having a state that is more coordinated. We have a number of different agencies. If it's the CPUC, if it's the CEC, if it's CalISO, if it's CARB, and they're not as coordinated as they need to be as it relates to getting out procurement information, making sure that we're fortifying the grid, figuring out how much we need in order to make our capacity. That's one thing. The second thing is mass infusion. The governor has proposed a budget of $1.3 billion for EV infrastructure. I think it should be a lot more. We also have to focus on how we're going to diversify our energy portfolio. How are we looking at biomass? How are we looking at wind? How are we looking at solar? What are we doing around our battery storages? How are we elevating our CCAs? All of those things are things that haven't been well coordinated, and we have to move aggressively in those directions. How do we put our cities to make sure that they're focusing on zero waste? How are we banning production, consumption, and waste? It's one thing to talk about how you're storing energy and creating energy, but it's another thing to talk about how you're cutting production, since we know that that is also contributing to the emissions. How are we creating zero waste buildings?
I have to stop you because I have to be fair.
Okay.
Sorry. All right. Thank you. Council Member Lee.
So yeah, definitely won't have time to answer this question and will be cut off, but I feel like there is a good reason to make the distinction between climate resiliency and sustainability. I think oftentimes people conflate both of those issues. I think sustainability is important. It has a lot of environmental racism sort of concerns and corollaries, but when it comes to climate resiliency, it's really about our ability to really keep our grid going in a natural disaster or a man-made disaster for that matter. And I think in that context, we need to invest heavily in battery storage, but then we also need to follow up the bill, I forget the bill's number, from a few years ago that required all new single-family housing construction to have solar panels. I think we need to do that with multifamily construction as well. I think we need to pump the creation of community choice aggregations. And I think we need to give people incentives and tax rebates for taking public transportation.
Pretty good for a minute. All right, thank you. And next, Cheryl Turner, and let me start you with a full minute.
Yes, it's Cheryl Turner. I think that we need to have a coordinated statewide response to an emergency situation. We don't want what happened in Texas to happen to us, although we don't have this cold air problem, but we do have problems with our grid. And obviously with the fires and some of them being caused by the grid problems, we need to go in and make sure that we are up to speed. We cannot put it off, making sure that, everything is intact and working properly. So we need to address those issues as well. And we need to provide, I think, more tax incentives or to continue tax credits on solar and on EVs and on charging stations. And we need to look at other issues too that are affecting our water and our air. I think we need to tighten the restrictions that we have on them, parts per million in the water. And
okay, thank you. I know it's a lot for a minute. All right, Renita.
Yes, Leanna, I feel like when we talk about resiliency, we have to address the housing and homelessness problem in our district when it comes to resiliency and rebuilding our community. We talk about building new infrastructure when we have infrastructure readily available that we can rebuild on. We have a community environment that's very interested in supporting our homeless community, and we haven't tapped into that. We have a lot of contracts that have not been accountable to restructuring and getting that done in a timely fashion. So what I propose to do is ensure that we are holding accountable all those things that we have in place to ensure that Mayor Garcetti's Resilient Los Angeles plan is coming into play, which he has some wonderful ideas. But again, ideas are not enough. You need strategy and you need action. So for me, I'm going to make sure we're starting to act on these bills.
Thank you. Well, thank you all so much.
Sorry, Lisa.
Yes.
I didn't go.
Yeah. Ernesto didn't go.
Ahead.
Great. So I think
Oh,
that's
sorry.
some-
Sorry. Let me start you. Let me start. Okay.
Yeah, so I think, again, it's a great question. At the heart of it, you know, California has an immense amount of resources. We have an abundant amount of resources to ensure that we get to tackle this climate crisis head on. And at the core of it, what we really need to do is move to a restructuring of how we produce and distribute goods. About 30 to 50% of the food we produce is never eaten, it just becomes waste. About 40% of our energy that is consumed is just is used primarily to heat, cool, and light the places where we are most, where we spend most of our time in. So what we really need to do is completely restructure our economy so that renewables are at the heart of it, and that also ensure that we have a program to really retrofit our entire structures like houses to ensure that they are net zero in effect.
Thank you. I want to say that I think we're in good hands regardless of who wins. So thank you so much. I'm just so frankly reassured by what a strong group of candidates we have. So thank you. Now we will move to committee updates. Sorry?
Thank you.
Thank you. Muriel, do you want to go ahead and give us a little update on transportation, please? Muriel?
Sorry. Oh, sorry. We're still promoting our parking cash out, and we're also finding sites for EVs and shared EVs for the transportation committee. Sorry. And we should have a meeting in March.
Yeah, I think it's the first Thursday of March, if I'm remembering correctly, at 7.
Yes.
And are you? Can you explain the parking cash out thing? If you don't want to, I can briefly.
Yeah, you can elaborate, Lisa.
Well, I don't know it exactly, but just so everybody knows, under certain circumstances, if your employer is leasing parking for you and you aren't using that parking, the law says that you get paid by your employer for that parking that the employer is leasing, if the employer is able to stop leasing the parking. So that's a little complicated. It only applies to some employees, but if you are somebody who has a parking space at work that you're not using, you should probably talk to your employer, because you very well might deserve a little check in the mail every month. So something to think about. Okay, trees committee, Joanne?
Yes, The Trees Committee is actually on track to be meeting every other month. And our March meeting will be on March 27th, which is a Saturday at 1:30. We are really pleased to have land use and environmental attorney Jamie T. Hall, who will present what sort of environmental analysis is required for protected tree removal. And this is not because we want them removed, but because unfortunately, we don't feel that the California Environmental Quality Act is being implemented correctly. So we want to understand how CEQA applies to especially single-family home development projects in the hills, because that's where our gold mine of natural trees exist, and they really are the foundation of our health and ecosystem services. They are kind of the Central Park of Los Angeles, the kind of, you know, not only is there Griffith Park, but it continues through the Mulholland corridor. And every time we have a McMansion built up there, and the single family homes seem to get bigger and bigger, we lose protected trees. And the Board of Public Works is also finally getting frustrated about this. So we are seeing this, I can't even call it progress, but we're starting to be understood. And even if you don't care about that sort of structure, you know, you may not live in the hills, they really are the basis for where our wildlife and birds and so forth. So we all do need to care about the removal of those trees. And it also mitigates fire and floods to have those natural trees. There's 6 protected trees, and it costs very little to get rid of them. So developers try all sorts of ways, sometimes legal, sometimes not legal, to get rid of them. So we're going to focus on that with a CEQA attorney, and he's going to give us some insight. So that'll be our meeting, 1:30 on March 27th. And if you want to be a member or a friend of the Trees Committee and want to be on our mailing list, our emailing list, please email me at trees@ncsa.la. Thanks.
Thank you, Joanne. Dan, do you want to say something about the Energy Committee?
Sure. The Energy Committee meets the second Monday of every month, I think. The next meeting is March 8th. If you're interested in participating, you could email me. I'll put my email address in the chat. It's stank@kegel.com. We're excited about the city's oil setback measure. It seems to have progressed. And we are excited that the city measure to divest the city employees pension system from oil and gas. That motion seems to have progressed as well. And tomorrow at 2 p.m., we're going to be watching and commenting on a city council motion to divest the city's insurance policies from oil and gas. And so that's very exciting. And contact me if you want to find out more. But we're very proud to have helped a number of neighborhood councils pass community impact statements in favor of these motions. That's one of our big focuses for action, is finding good things that a city council member has proposed and giving them political support from the neighborhood councils. And if you'd like to get your hands dirty in that direction, please give us a call. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Yeah, tomorrow is actually a very exciting day for us. So if you want to join, let us know. Okay, Philip, can you say a couple words about the advocacy committee?
Sure. So I'm not the chair of the committee, but I'm going to chair the next meeting. So that's why Lisa suggested that I give an update. So basically, the committee recently has been basically it always looks at things that don't fit into any of the other categories the other committees don't handle. And recently, we've been talking about transit-oriented community developments, parking minimums, and community land trusts. So if you're interested in chiming in to any one of those, coming to the next meeting, that's next on March 7. So the first Sunday of the month at 6 p.m. And I guess I'll let Lisa fill in anything else.
No, that was great. Thank you.
Lisa, can I invite people to our Food and Water Watch launch?
Yeah, this is this is time for announcements anybody wants to make.
Great. So I'm going to just share my screen really quick so that you guys see. We're having a launch of our Climate Justice for LA campaign. This coming Thursday, February 25th from 5:30 to 7:30. You can access the event on our Facebook by just searching Food and Water Watch California. And we invite everybody to participate, especially if you want to get more involved with the 100% study. If you want to learn more, or if you want to advocate to your city council members to get the NCSAs and the rest of the city to 100% by 2030. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Other announcements? I think Ariel had one. I have a couple.
Hey. Yeah. Hi, Lisa. This is Ariel. I haven't had the chance to meet everyone in person yet due to the circumstances, but I am from city planning. I've been with the department for about a year now, and I'm looking forward to attending more of your meetings this year, especially. I have one quick update that I wanted to provide on behalf of city planning, and that's in regards to the transportation demand management program. So our department, in conjunction with LADOT, wants to invite everyone to learn more about the city's latest efforts to advance sustainable mobility through a proposed update to the city's TDM program. So I'm going to share a link to an informational video and a fact sheet that that would be great if people clicked on it to learn a little bit more. I know that Muriel is on the transportation committee, so it would be great to connect on that front. But in closing, I'm looking forward to, continuing this collaboration, continuing the conversation between city planning and the Sustainability Alliance. So if any of you have any questions for me, feel free to reach out to my email, or you can ask them now. If there's something that I can't answer in this very moment, then I'll be sure to get in touch with you all after this meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I look forward to meeting you in person.
Yeah, one day.
I have a couple announcements, but I don't need to go next. Is there anything else? No? Okay, then I guess I'll go, or you can chime in still. Our next meeting is going to be March 14th. It's going to be, and Tony, you can go after me. And it's going to be on waste and how we navigate waste these days. And also our board is proposing a new approach to advocacy for the NCSA. So this is a meeting that I really think all of our representatives should be attending, because we're going to be talking about what that might look like and getting your folks' feedback. Also, we're doing a series of workshops on electric vehicles. Our next one, I just realized, unfortunately conflicts with Food and Water Watch's event, so I won't be able to attend their event. And this one is going to be in Spanish and English. So please do help get the word out, because we want to make sure that that folks know about the amazing incentives for electric vehicles, and this will be co-hosted by the Boyle Heights Neighborhood Council. Okay, I think that's it for me. Tony, go for it.
Just a quick update because of Ariel's mention of the mobility issue. I think that the final meeting for Metro's congestion pricing plan is on February 27th. So if you go to Metro and look that up, it'll give you the link and how to register for it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I want to say lastly, please do complete the evaluation form. We really do look at those and talk about them as a board and change things because of what you tell us. So tell us what you liked and also tell us what you didn't like tonight. I've put the link in the chat a couple times, one time quite recently, so you should be able to grab it. And I think that's it. Does anybody else have any last words? That sounds morbid. I shouldn't say it that way. Final words, whatever. You know what I mean.
Just thank you and let's do this.
Yeah, and thank you so much to all the speakers. I'm so excited about the race because I feel like we're going to be in great shape for state senate, and so excited about what we need to do regarding renewable energy. But I think what we can do and how it can actually, you know, that cliche about every crisis is an opportunity. I really think that's the case here. I think there's a lot of good we can do while we're transitioning to 100% renewable energy. So I'm excited for what the future will bring and hope you folks stay involved. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you. Great job, Lisa. Great job, speakers.
Good job, everybody.
Thank you
very much, Lisa, and everybody in the Sustainability Alliance. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. And thank you. Daniel was really very instrumental in tonight's meeting. So thank you, Daniel. Okay, I'm going to stop recording.